government reports now about livestock don't talk about farmers' cows or ranchers' cows or animals. They talk about my cows being part of the national herd and my chickens being part of the national flock. They've actually changed the terminology. They're gradually trying to view food as a national resource that can easily be nationalized. And there's not a lot of difference between a national resource and a nationalized resource.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for November 25th through December 2nd, 2024, while supplies last. First, we feature backdated 1-ounce silver Austrian Philharmonics at just $3.09 over spot per ounce. We also feature the limited edition 2024 1-ounce gold UK Lion and Eagle coin at just $99 over spot per ounce. And finally, 1/10 ounce gold Britannia are just $29.99 over melt per coin. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.
Welcome back to Liberty and Finance. We're always privileged to have a widely followed guest who's an expert on self-sufficiency, on natural methods of providing food for your family and food security. Joel Salatin is a teaching farmer from Polyface Farms. He joins us this Monday, November 25th, 2024. Joel, thanks for joining us again here on Liberty and Finance.
Thank you, Donegan. It's always an honor and a privilege to be with you.
Well, your wisdom and your in-depth, positive, energetic knowledge of how people can basically return to the best of the past by doing things in the smartest ways possible to make their food supply be healthy and secure and not be necessarily having to bow down to the sick food and pharma food and Franken foods that were being foisted on us these days, as for the good of our families, for the good of our health, for the good of the world, is something that you teach people about all over the place. You do lectures, you do writing, etc. There was an article that appeared just recently, and we'll put a link to the article in the description of this video, but it jumped out at me, and I wanted to get it in front of, give you a chance to unpack it for our viewers. The name of the article is A Little Dystopian: Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates Bankrolling Methane Vaccine for Cattle, funding the development of a vaccine designed to reduce the methane produced by cattle. But it seems like it's a very experimental stage thing that could be coming into our food supply. You've talked to us in the past about lab food, lab-grown meats, and all sorts of things like that. But this is another one about an attack on the natural God-designed ways that animals and people have lived together for millennia, if not longer. And what do we know about this latest, ledger domain that's coming our way, and what impact it may have on people's health and on our biodiversity, et cetera?
Yeah, well, this is just another example of elitist mechanics trying to come at the majesty and mystery of life with a parts-oriented mentality. And of course, realize that these same outfits have been pouring millions and millions, if not billions of dollars into lab meat, lab cultured protein. And it is, to say that it is a distinct failure would be an understatement. If you read the earlier literature from when they started, so realize right now this venture capital investment money is at the same stage in this idea as lab meat, fake meat was about 12 years ago. So if you go back 12 years to what was being said at that time about lab meat, what was being said was that within 5 years it will be 30% of the animal protein market. Farmland will be worthless. Cattle will be cheaper than dirt because nobody will be eating them. And we have short memories. People have short memories. And I think it's important to remind people of the statements that were made. I mean, just like I remind people all the time that 40 years ago, the educational establishment was trying to criminalize homeschooling because they said, we won't be able to build enough psychiatric units to handle all the ill-adapted, homeschool kids. Well, as it turned out, the homeschoolers have been a lot less problem than the public schoolers as far as adaptation, suicide, and psychiatry. So, just because some elite wealthy person decides that some sector of the world needs their expertise and money does not mean that it'll be successful. And of course, now here we are 12 years or so after all the initial launch of all this fake meat stuff. And you really don't hear much about it anymore because it ended up being an abject failure. They couldn't duplicate our arteries and veins and hearts and kidneys and livers. And so about the biggest vat they've been able to make anything in is about a 5-gallon bucket because you just can't move the waste out of the system. And it's bathed in antibiotics up the wazoo in order to keep the bacteria out because it's so filthy because it can't move the waste out. So that is really, really on the back burner. So here we are with here's the new shiny, bright, shiny object. And we're going to vaccinate cows so they don't fart as much. And it's again, messing around with the basic, created order of the way an animal works. And the thing is, that's important to realize is that in a pastured situation, a ruminant, eating grass in a healthy pasture situation, 1 acre produces enough methanotrophic bacteria. So that, let me say that one more time very slowly so people can get it. It's methanotrophic. Well, the first part of that is methane. Okay. So methanotrophic bacteria on healthy pasture will reach out. These are bacteria that will reach out and grab methane to the amount that would be produced by 1,000 cows per acre. Well, nobody's going to graze 1,000 cows per acre. So nature already has all the answers for the methane production from cows. It's all part of the beautiful cycle. And so if we just go to a more natural production system, get rid of the feedlots, quit feeding cows corn, because cornfields don't make methanotrophic bacteria. Feedlots don't make methanotrophic bacteria. Concrete does not make methanotrophic bacteria. Only good, healthy, diversified pastures do. So if we go back to the basic way cows are fed, there will be way more methanotrophic bacteria to take care of the methane than anything else. And so that's one aspect. The second aspect, very quickly, is that they're looking at this as a zero-sum game. Oh, we've got methane, that's a problem. But the fact is, nature has all sorts of mechanisms to assimilate, metabolize, and deal with that methane production. So the whole thing is an agenda against cows, and I don't know where that actually originates. Where the mentality originates, but there's definitely a prejudice against cows, and it's of course it's unnecessary and fairly misdirected.
We recently attended a family event in Texas and drove quite a ways through Texas, although anybody who visits Texas has to drive quite a way through Texas. And we passed a significant variety of cattle operations there. Some were unbearable for many, many, many minutes. Significant sections of an hour, we drove past concentrated feedlots. We could scarcely breathe and wondered how anybody could live there. And We've seen that in other states as well, not at that scale, though. It is the first time we've seen it at that scale. But then in the next county over, we saw these rolling agrarian hills and these widely scattered pastured herds of cattle and their calves scampering around in the grass, and just thought, that's the most beautiful thing you could see. What is the current status of? You mentioned that in properly pastured livestock production, there's a whole balance of nature that comes into play. What is the current range of, and then on the other end of that spectrum is the 5-gallon bucket with the lab grown meat. But where are we at right now in our country as far as how much of our like, for example, meat production is done in a pastured manner, and is it potentially a grab against? Is it trying to actually control and restrict the food supply in your view, or is it a grab for land, or what are the factors? You said you don't know what the drivers are, but what have you observed at least, and where are we at in this process?
Well, so pastured livestock includes, chicken, pigs, cattle, and in general, I would say we're somewhere in the 1% to 2% range. Cattle are higher than all the others. Well-managed pastures are probably pushing, even 7 or 8%. I haven't seen anything definitive on this, but just my sense is that we're probably in the 7 to 8%, which gets to be significant actually. In other words, we're in the early adopter stage. The lunatic fringe is out there at the 1 to 2%, and then the early adopter is up to 10%, and then it kind of starts to tip over. So cattle, of course, are farther along than anything else, but it's still a tiny fraction of what's actually being done. And when I say properly managed pastures, I mean going back to the wolf bison template, where the herbivore is moving along onto fresh ground pretty much daily, and they don't come back to the previously grazed ground for a period of time. Might be a month, might be several months. But there's a period of time there of rest. There's a rest period before they come back. They don't stay on the same field. They don't stay in the same spot for very long. And the problem is that we, right now, with most of our domestic cattle, they're not moved to fresh ground routinely. They're on the same pasture, year-round or almost year-round. And so it can never rest and can never actually regrow, and the cattle can't be on new ground. And so the whole system degenerates as opposed to regenerate.
The concern that many of our viewers have is about freedom. I mean, that's the title of our channel, is Liberty and Finance. And you and I have spoken on this channel since 2013 when we started. And that time we were called Reluctant Preppers, talking about preparedness. And all of that is about securing the things that you need to have a thriving life, including not the least of which your food supply. And you've talked to us about securing food security. This is one of the concerns of our viewers, is that there are apparently increasing restrictions being placed on access to the rights to farm, the rights to grow your own food, and the rights to even be able to have access to food that comes from nature rather than coming through some corporate/government controlled process. Your assessment of where we're at in that progression, is the megatrend still towards corporate and government control over the food supply, all of course in the name of public well-being, et cetera. But how is that process playing out?
Yeah, isn't it amazing how many things can be done in the name of public safety?
Yeah.
Public safety, number one. Well, they talk about got to protect the public. Well, how about we protect the private? So where we are has been quite a juggernaut, and it is continuing. I mean, now we have mandatory radio frequency identification staring at us down the pike for cattle, not for poultry yet, but certainly for cattle. And so what's going to be very interesting is to see if this last election with Trump going in and the amount of what shall we say, mavericks that he's brought to the inner sanctum, how that's going to bear out on this tyrannical juggernaut that's been developing. There is a lot of people don't realize that much of the government reports now about livestock don't talk about farmers' cows or ranchers' cows or animals. They talk about my cows being part of the national herd and my chickens being part of the national flock. They've actually changed the terminology in documents to go from just generic cows or chickens to, the national flock, the national herd. Well, you don't have to be a political geek to realize that putting the national herd or the national flock, the word national in front of those words is not a mistake. They're gradually trying to view food as a national, and then as a national resource that can easily be nationalized. And there's not a lot of difference between a national resource and a nationalized resource. So I don't know if this last election is going to be able to, turn that table, but that's certainly the progression that we see. Where we get regulations to, for example, require vaccination. All of these kinds of, if you can require a radio frequency identification tag on an animal, well, it's not far to say, you've got to vaccinate your animals. And then it's not far to say, well, you have to raise them this way. You can't, for example, have them outside because a red-winged blackbird might encounter them and bring a disease to some neighbor's animals. And so, yes, there is definitely a movement that direction, even while the consumer movement is toward, local, know your farmer, know your food. That movement is moving apace as well. So we have the two opposite ends ongoing. The bureaucratic move is toward tyranny, and the consumer move right now is toward freedom. And so those are interesting, juxtapositions within the culture at the same time.
Well, that reminds me, if you mentioned the election and the way for the past three major electoral cycles in the U.S., we interviewed our dearly beloved and belated Rob Kirby, who coined the term. He said we are witnessing the massive battle between globalists and ordinary people, and I think you've talked to us about that as well in the past. But there seems to be this dichotomy of these two countercurrents that are both very powerful and yet flowing in opposite directions at the same time. We think we've seen that in the past three major electoral cycles, where you have this populist uprising of people voting in greater numbers than ever before, organizing in greater numbers than ever before, attending rallies in greater numbers than ever before, and yet you have the quote unquote official polls and prognostications and everything saying, no, it's going the other direction. It's going the direction of the favored, kind of the installed candidates. Do you believe that in our food supply we have do we have any examples maybe you can point to where the populist or the consumer driven or the free choice model or the privacy based model or the private rights model has been successful at fending off this counter pressure from officialdom to wrestle away control over our lives and take away our freedoms in the area of the food?
Yeah, so the most exciting thing in my mind in this respect, there are two. I'll mention two. One is Congressman Thomas Massey's Prime Act, which he has been valiantly fighting for almost a decade now, ever since he went to Congress from Kentucky. But the Prime Act would give states the option to allow the sale of custom processed meat by the cut within the state boundaries. And he says that from his contacts, the day that passes, 1,000 local abattoirs, that's the French word for slaughterhouse, sounds a little nicer than slaughterhouse, but processing, butchering, processing facility.
Everything sounds better in French.
Yeah, sure it does. So these abattoirs, these neighborhood abattoirs, 1,000 of them would either reopen or start up new, within a day or two of the Prime Act passing. That would be the single most, the biggest cannon shot, if you will, across the bow of the entrenched elite food supply that I've seen in my lifetime. It doesn't sound like much, but it's big, because it would allow for the first time neighbor-to-neighbor sales of uninspected meat. And that has not been allowed for decades, many decades. So that's one. And it continues to gain traction. It gained a lot of traction during 2020 when the supermarket shelves were empty. And everybody realized, boy, if we had had 50,000, neighborhood abattoirs supplying our meat instead of 500 massive centralized abattoirs funneling the meat, we would have had much of a less disruption in the food system. And that's absolutely right. So diversifying, democratizing, spreading the processing funnel out across the landscape is a no-brainer for security, stability, and safety. All right. So that's one. The Prime Act is interesting. We're, of course, seeing numerous states enact, food sovereignty laws. Maine right now, I think, has the very best one, and they're leading the nation in this, where they've got food sovereignty codified to where, you and I, if we want to engage in a food transaction, we can do it without a bureaucrat in between us. We've got right now in the U.S., we have, choice in the bedroom, choice in the bathroom, choice in the womb, but we don't have choice in the kitchen. That's where we are. And so that's one. And the third one that I'll mention, so that's on its way. I mean, Virginia, we have an amendment coming on that's a food, the right to transact food commerce without a bureaucrat involved. We've got one of those going in next year as well in our state constitution. So, things are happening on that score. The third thing I'll mention is the Rogue Food Conference, which John Moody and I started in the spring of, or in the winter of 2020, or the spring of 2020, February, right before the lockdown and COVID and all that. And that has really grown some traction. So the Rogue Food Movement, or Rogue Food Conference, RFC, our mantra is circumvention, not compliance. There comes a time, Dunnigan, when tyranny gets so bad that it's more efficient to circumvent it than it is to try to comply. Mm-hmm. That's kind of where we are in the food system. So what we've done here for 4 years, we've been doing this conference two a year, spread around the country. We just did one in Dallas about 4 weeks ago. The next one's going to be in Florida, and the next one's going to be in Cincinnati in the fall of next year. But we spread these out around the country, and what we're doing is we're showcasing the successful people who have circumvented food regulations. And so there's all sorts of things that people can do to thwart and to create to create food freedom on their own scale. So there's a lady in North Carolina that started a food church, for example, and if you join her church, you can get the food. There's John Moody with his food club in Louisville, where you invest and you don't pay for the food. The food is a dividend. So there are rules. There are legal rules about what is a sale, what is in commerce. And so if you can conceive of a way to transact business that doesn't adhere to the definition of sale, you can come out from under government jurisdiction, because this is not a sale, it is something else. And one of the cool ones is if you can figure out a way to make the transaction an investment and the food a dividend, investment is not considered a sale because there's not a guarantee. You can lose your shirt. And so what John Booty's people do is they invest in a food, in a co-op, and then their investment is deducted when they go and shop. It's simply a deduction. They're as like a dividend, an investment to a dividend. And when they go to zero, they invest again. So this is some clever paperwork, but it does give the right. Probably many people are familiar with herd shares, milk herd shares for states that prohibit the sale of raw milk, where I buy a share in a herd, and that entitles me to a gallon a week or 2 gallons a week, per share because now I'm getting the milk from my own cow. Again, that's a dividend from investment. If the herd is liquidated and I don't get my milk, I can't go and say I want my investment back, and that by definition makes it a non-sale. There's a guy out in Oregon, and so what he does is he sells his animals. He retains the ownership of the guts and the hide. The customer gets the meat, and you can process your own animal. So he processes his own animal for the guts, and then gives away the meat, or partners out the meat. But because he's slaughtering his own animal, that becomes legal. And again, the state's been thwarted as to trying to close him down. Another big one is pet food. That is a huge one right now. Farmers are selling their cheese as pet food, milk as pet food, meat as pet food, and that is all over the country now. People are doing that, and it's gotten a lot of traction. Now, I will tell you that is the first one that has really gotten the attention of the government. I call them the food police. And I imagine we're going to see that loophole begin to close. I can't believe that they'll just let that loophole run unchallenged. Because farmers are doing this all over the not for human. All you got to do is put not for human consumption, and boom, you can have completely out of the system. Another one is the private membership association. There are farms now that are developing private membership associations. Again, you join a private membership association, it's not public, so it comes out of the public sphere. That's a mechanism. And one that I think is really funny is with the internet now. You can have you can easily do a curriculum, a course. So people are doing butchery courses or cheese making courses, and so you pay for the course. And part of your curriculum materials that's free is meat or cheese or milk or whatever else. That's part of the curriculum. So you get the tools of the curriculum free as part of joining the course. So you want to get $500 worth of beef. Well, you join, pay for my course, $500. We'll show you how to butcher a beef, and then we'll just give you what you need. We'll give you $500 worth of beef as part of the materials. You don't get pencils, you don't get paper, but you do get beef. And so that goes right on with the whole idea of circumventing. And so there is finally, and one that's fascinating to me, is another constitutional amendment that's been put in by Congressman Thomas Massey, and I'll just read it to you because I got it right here on my wall. It says that the right of the people to grow food and to purchase food from the source of their choice shall not be infringed. So obviously the word infringed makes it sound like, something from the Bill of Rights. And that's exactly what he's copied. He's copied that kind of language from the Bill of Rights to be able to create a guarantee of food freedom. And what this does legally is it gives a person standing. So right now, for example, if somebody says it says, no, you can't have friends over for dinner, I have a constitutional right to assemble. That's in the Bill of Rights, the right of assembly. And so I can, and so if you keep me from being, if a government agent says, no, you can't have an assembly, then we can sue for redress because the Bill of Rights gives us that standing. The problem is right now, if the government says, no, you can't get that kind of food, I have no standing because there's no right guaranteed legally for me to be able to make that food choice. So the beauty of this...
Isn't this ironic that things which we're having to deal with in the past decade or so have been perhaps unimaginable to the founding fathers, that anyone would even do such a thing? Although I guess there's some history of that between Ireland and England. But go ahead. I'm sorry I interrupted. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, and in fact, there was discussion about food rights in the original country, but it was such a peripheral issue. I mean, back in that day, they could. You mean a neighbor can't come over and get a glass of milk? It was preposterous. They couldn't have imagined that the country would ever go to a place where a neighbor couldn't come over and buy a glass of milk from a neighbor. And so here's where we are. So the beauty of this is, the beauty of Massey's constitutional amendment is that it actually gives legal standing, so that if a bureaucrat gets in the way of me exercising that right to purchase the food of my choice shall not be infringed, then I now have legal standing, and I can sue the government for getting in the way of exercising my rights.
Well, you've covered a wide range of things here that are of extreme value for us right now going forward. People are very concerned about the potential of a dystopic future we're already starting to live in, and that we're concerned is going to keep coming at us like a freight train. And but the other thing that I wanted to get back to, maybe, and I have to be on a future conversation, is the positive, the optimistic side. What you were talking about, such as the methane consuming bacteria that naturally grow in a pastured situation, and just the beauty of doing things in a way that's in harmony with nature, and you can just be smarter about it. We see that in medical, we see that in so many areas of our lives that are being absolutely trampled by this one tracked way of doing things. And you could look at it as massive ignorance, or you could say, nah, it's all goes back to control, power, and profits. But anyway, we would love to have you back again to talk about some of those ways that people can, in small ways or large ways, either personally, directly themselves, or by finding producers who are already doing it the right way and patronizing them. We recently had our first order of polyface meats delivered from your farm. Thank you. We enjoyed those tremendously. The quality was exceptional. We did some chicken thighs in the crock pot, and oh my goodness gracious. So anyway,
yeah, that's good stuff. Well, I'll tell you, one of the optimistic things right now is that the cost of the logistical cost of distribution has steadily decreased and decreased and decreased, while the cost of maintaining bricks and mortar public interfaces has increased and increased. And so it's fascinating to see the general option now for the first time to Uberize our food system and just come out from under the government's thumbnail.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's never been more possible. It's never been price competitive, and so yes, we didn't have a clue that this, when we started nationwide shipping, we didn't have a clue that it would develop the way it has. but it really has. And as the price of fuel has gone up, the crime in the cities, people don't want to leave their houses. This comes right to your doorstep. You open the door, you pull it in. I mean, Faith Popcorn wrote about this in her futuristic book. She called it cocooning. When crime increases and people are scared to go out, they cocoon. They cocoon in their house. They've got their entertainment center. They've got their they're linked up. They can do their work from the house. They can homeschool, and they can get their food from outside. And you basically create a fortress in your own house. And that's where these kind of things take us, when we see these trends.
Well, there's a lot of aspects to that as well that we want to get into, what people can do directly where they're at, what they can do together with their neighbors in their local community, how they can support local growers, and how they can even take advantage of, in our current infrastructure, remote growers who can still get them things quickly and very fresh, very healthily pastured, whatever, even if that's not happening where they live. So Joel Salatin, if people want to find out more about your writings, your current work, and keep connected with you, where should they go?
Polyface Farms, that's our farm, Polyface, Polyface Farms. Jump on the website there. I don't have a personal website. I don't do personal social media much. I mean, I do have a blog that I do, but Polyface Farms is our website. It gives you my speaking schedule, the gathering schedule, the event schedule on the farm, food, books, swag, and media, media stuff that's going on about us, and podcasts that we do, like this one.
Well, Joel, you're always welcome here on Liberty and Finance. We're hoping to see more of you in the future, and thank you, as always, for joining us.
Thank you, Donegan.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for November 25th through December 2nd, 2024, while supplies last. First, we feature backdated 1-ounce silver Austrian Philharmonics at just $3.09 over spot per ounce. We also feature the limited edition 2024 1-ounce gold UK Lion and Eagle coin at just $99 over spot per ounce. And finally, 1/10 ounce gold Britannia are just $29.99 over melt per coin. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.